What's up guys, my name is Aplex and I'm a competitive Mario Kart player mainly active on 8 Deluxe on Switch. Last week I got the opportunity to try out the new Mario Kart World game at the Nintendo Switch Experience in London for about 2 hours, and I'd like to share the gameplay and my thoughts on how the game felt. I'll structure this video in multiple segments. First I want to talk about some general thoughts and observations, then I want to go through some features the game introduced. Next I want to discuss techniques that are going to be important for playing the game at a high level, some of which you might already be familiar from previous Mario Kart games, but also mechanics that seem to be exclusive to MK World. Lastly, I'll mention some niche interactions I noticed or just some stuff that I feel didn't really fit into any of the other categories. The version we played was a special demo version, so take the information I've gathered from playing it with a grain of salt, because there's always a chance that the final version is going to behave slightly differently. For instance, it was only possible to play the knockout mode in 100cc, and smart steering and auto acceleration were forced by default, and there was no way to pause the game or disable them in the character selection screen, which is why it felt a bit limited. Regarding the general feel of the game, I thought the steering was more heavy and clunky, as if you had very low traction on all the tracks. Once you commit to a drift, you cannot adjust your line very well, regardless of whether you try to hold wide or tight. Chaining mini turbos together, or MTs for short, appear to be much weaker than an MK8D, while drafting gives you a very sharp speed boost and seems quite strong. Getting bumped also feels less impactful than it was in MKV or MK8, but this could have also been due to the smart steering. Regardless, after getting used to the new feel, I actually quite enjoyed playing it, even though the gameplay seems a little more simple at first, but as we'll see later, I think there's going to be some intricate strategies to explore. To me, it felt like in knockout mode, the best strategy in the first 3 sectors was to always bag. Drop for a bottom 4 spot box, which usually gives you shrooms and a power item, and you hold them until right before the next checkpoint. The bullet bill seemed a bit slower compared to ADX or Wii, so I would think it's weaker in general. Another reason for that is that bullets no longer spin out people if they get hit. On the other hand, Goldens feel especially strong, so it's almost impossible to get eliminated early on if you hold onto a golden and or a power item till the very end of a sector. On the later checkpoints with less chaos, it also feels more beneficial to be near the front of the pack, and it becomes increasingly more difficult to catch back up to the players in first and second. I should add that in MK8D, the item distribution depended not only on your spot, but also on your distance to first. From what I've seen so far, I don't think this is the case for this installment. I've seen triple shrooms ghost or triple reds pulled right behind first multiple times, so I would expect the only thing that matters for your items is the spot you hit the box in. Coins are returning in the game, and you can now collect up to 20. However, it did not feel like the amount of coins you carry makes that much of a difference on your top speed, while in MKD it's really night and day how many coins you have. My concern was at first that it would be difficult to collect coins as there are so many players now, but I found it actually really easy to reach 20 coins in the first section of the knockout mode already. If anyone pulls a coin shell or coin block, that drops a lot of coins on the course, and the static coins on the courses respawn almost instantly. In MK World's knockout mode, there's of course a lot of cars everywhere. If you hit them from the side, it only tilts your cart a little bit, which prevents you from drifting for a short while, but it doesn't slow you down or make you lose coins. If you drive into a car head on, you start tumbling and lose 3 coins, but importantly you do not lose speed. The same is true now, by the way, if you get hit by a bullet. You just get pushed out of the way, but you don't spin out anymore. Let's go over some of the completely new features the game will introduce. There's several items that were not in MK8DX, some of which are brand new to the Mario Kart series. The food item is sort of a special case, as you cannot obtain it from regular item boxes, but instead there's food bags scattered around the courses, and collecting one will always give you the food bag item. Using it will give you a boost just like a mushroom, and if you use any of the main cast of characters, like Mario, Luigi, Daisy, it will also change the costume to fit the environment of the course, which is only cosmetic. Fortunately, not all characters have costumes, which, to everyone's dismay, includes the cow. The feather is technically a returning item from Super Mario Kart, but in MKD it was only available in the battle mode, so we'll count it for now. The feather now gives a really big jump, which makes me wonder how many game-breaking shortcuts could be discovered for online play with this item. A Nintendo employee also confirmed to me that you can use it to dodge the blue. My best guess is that you can jump over the blue explosion once it targets you. Next up, the Ice Flower is a completely new item from the new Super Mario Bros. Series of games, and it seems to function essentially the same as the Fire Flower. The Hammer item allows you to throw a couple of hammers forwards or backwards in an arc, which I suppose makes it some sort of shorter range boomerang with a little bit more throws, but I don't actually think I saw the hammer or either of the flower items show up that many times. The worst feeling in ATX for me was being in the back or the mid pack on a track with very few coins and then being unable to catch up even with good items. The coin block can be used multiple times and you get a coin with each activation. In the end it explodes and leaves a group of coins on the ground for other racers to take. The coin shell you can throw forwards in the direction you aim and it will sort of auto-follow the track, kind of like a blue shell. It's gonna leave a trail of coins behind, so as the person using it, you're pretty much guaranteed to at least pick up a few coins if you follow it, but also people further up in the pack can benefit from it, if they avoid it and then collect the coins it spawns. I think this item has a lot of potential if you use it in situations where multiple people line up for a double item, or they are clustered on a narrow section of the course. The Mega Mushroom is another item, which has last been seen on the Wii. Unlike an MKW, where it was more of a mid-spot item, it's now been relegated to an item you most frequently pull in the bottom spots. While it feels stronger than an MKW, using a Mega Mushroom now blocks your item slot for the entire duration, just like a bullet does. This means that you cannot chain a Mega Mushroom in the item set like you can with a star to get 2 new items in a double box. And speaking of the star, I just wanted to briefly mention that stars felt extremely rare. I only pulled a single star in my almost 2 hours of playing, while I pulled a ton of megas and even builds. Some tracks can now have ground stars too. If I remember correctly, this only ever occurred on Mario Kart Double Dash Rainbow Road previously, unless you want to count the ground stars from MKW's Maple Tree where you leave piles. So it will probably be shown if this is perhaps a buff to front running, as this might mean that the person first has the easiest time picking one up. Another small update to an already existing item is the Boo. You can now see the person using a ghost in a sort of transparent way, which is a small quality of life thing that makes it less frustrating with people backing shells, a bomb, or taking away the item box you were going for when you were previously unable to see them in front of you. The shock is quite different than it was in MK8D. First of all, it only hits people that are in front of you. The shock felt quite common in the knockout mode, and someone would usually obtain it at the second set of items in most sectors. I myself have only pulled the shock once, and I was in last place, but I've seen shocks used quite far up in the pack, so I imagine you can also pull it in some of the lower mid spots and not only in last or bottom 2 spots or something. Thus far, I've not seen multiple shocks in play at the same time, so it could be the case that the shock is back to being limited to a single one again, as it was in MK7 and earlier. If that's true, then it's a weird kind of dilemma. On the one hand, you're incentivized to hold the shock as no one else can pull one, but the more people you pass, the less effective it is to use one. And speaking of shocks, they now completely kill your momentum, and everyone stays shrunken for the same amount of time regardless of their position. But it's only a very short time before you grow back to your normal size again. This means that if you see someone holding the shock behind you, you can slow down to let them pass and it will have the same effect as dodging the shock with a power item. If you get shocked in the glider, it works the same as it does in MKD, at least after the DLC updates. You will lose your items, but you will keep your momentum, and the glider is the same speed as if you were large, and you will crucially not get target shocked in a glider and fall off. Dodging in a Mega Mushroom also doesn't shrink you back down to regular size anymore like it did in MKW. Upon being shocked, some items will drop to the ground and they can be picked up by other racers. This most notably involves mushrooms, but I've also seen a feather being dropped after shock, so I suppose running into it would give you the tall jump a feather normally gives. I didn't see any ground stars being dropped, which was an interaction that I was wondering about, because they used to drop in MKW for those who didn't know, but they no longer do in ADX, except for Crazy 8. And since ground stars can now naturally occur on certain tracks, I would think that maybe stars could still drop if there's a shock, but as I said previously, they seem to be quite rare in general, so maybe when the shocks were used, there just wasn't anyone holding a star in their first slot, so I just never saw a ground star being dropped from shock. Last but certainly not least is the crystal ball item, which sends Kamek to sabotage the racers in front of you by turning them into one of Bowser's minions and then creating stage hazards of the minion type on the racetrack. I believe this item is a pretty interesting concept, and it could have, in my opinion, just straight up replaced the blooper because they kind of use the same concept. Once again, especially in narrow sections on Grand Prix mode courses, Kamek suddenly summoning in 15 unnamed cows can for sure pose a big obstacle for players in front of the pack. I'm sure that by now most of you are familiar with the new character roster. Interestingly, pretty much none of the Mario enemy and NPC characters were unlocked for the demo except for the cow. And when Kamek transforms you into one of the stage hazard characters, there was a little red exclamation mark next to the transformation. This made me think that the crystal ball Kamek item might be one of the ways of unlocking them. If you use the food bag item to transform into one of the costumes for the characters, you can actually also see the red exclamation mark. And we already know that this is confirmed to be the way to unlock the costumes. I would personally really like if a lot of the characters were initially locked and you'd have to complete certain missions in the free roam mode or other game modes to unlock them. I don't want to be a gatekeeper or something, but I would also love if some of them were very difficult to unlock and you'd have to grind for them, like it felt to me in Mario Kart DS and Wii as a kid, instead of only needing to finish first in offline GP like it was in MK8 on the Wii U, for instance. Yet another concept that MK World likes to play around is different types of cars as stage obstacles in the knockout mode. Of course, we all know Moonview Highway's bomb cars by now, or even the truck from Mario Kart 8 Store Turnpike with the glider panel attached to them, but this game goes even further. There's not only a DK barrel car that launches into the air, but you can straight up transform into a giant truck and barrel through the back while being completely invincible by the looks of it. The truck transformation in particular seems extremely overpowered, and I wonder if this is yet another thing that will really benefit the person first, assuming there's only one of these that can be accessed at the same time. One thing that I don't think has been officially announced is a ranked mode, which I know some people have wondered about. One of the Nintendo employees I talked to indeed confirmed there would be ranked mode, but they didn't know any details. Now we don't really know what this mode will entail, but my best guess would be that this mode could be a worldwide version of the knockout mode, where you gain or lose ELO or MMR at the end of each knockout tour. I believe we did see footage of the game where it looked like one of the racers had a platinum colored emblem next to their name, so this could perhaps be obtained through ranking up in this mode. I could imagine this mode would function similarly to the Super Mario Maker 2 rank mode for those of you who are familiar with it. In the demo, while everyone was choosing the cup they want to play, you could drive around in the free roam mode a little bit. In certain spots there were big golden coins, so we know for sure there's going to be some collectibles in the overworld. Personally, I'd hope for both some nice objectives to collect and secrets to explore. I would also not be surprised if there was some missions you could complete by talking to certain characters, and you can maybe challenge them to races, similar to what you could do in Mario and Sonic at the Olympic Winter Games 2010 in Vancouver on the DS, which is a really good game by the way. Now let's talk about the most interesting part in my opinion, at least from the point of view of a competitive player. I tried my best to test out some of the strats that allowed for optimized gameplay in previous MK titles, so let's go through these mechanics and I'll attempt to explain how these felt. One point of contention was whether or not soft drifting is returning in the game. If you want to read up about soft drifting, I can really recommend checking out Vike's guide on drifting techniques, but a very brief summary is that in 8DX, holding the stick at an angle between 45 and 135 degrees while drifting builds a mini turbo much quicker than if you held your stick at an angle of lower than 45 degrees, for right-hand drift for instance. The benefit of drifting at a soft drift angle of, let's say, 50 or 60 degrees is that you can take a smoother line around a turn while still building your mini turbo as quickly as possible. I talked to two other competitive players who played MK World, and they told me that after excessive testing, they are convinced that soft drifting will not be returning in this game, and they claimed that wiggle drifting, which basically means rocking your stick from left to right in quick succession, is the best way to build up mini turbos quickly. I myself could only test the drift mechanics for a very short while, and to me it seemed that hard drifting at 90 degrees was building a mini turbo up quite quickly, while smaller angles took longer for the MT to charge. The wiggle drifting seemed about as good as the hard drift method, but we'll likely just have to wait until someone else does further testing or the game releases and we get some closure on this topic. Another mechanic that exists in 8DX are empty tricks, where you charge a blue mini turbo and release it right as you trick on a ramp for an extra speed boost. This seems to work exactly the same in MK World this time around too, from what I could test in free roam mode and in the races I played. Once again, I could only test it for 100cc, so on 150cc they might turn out to be more useful. Directional tricks also still exist for what it's worth. Turning a stick in any of the 4 main directions will result in a different trick animation. In 8DX, the direction of your trick can be important depending on the track. On certain ramps you can perform an empty side trick into the direction you want to propel yourself to gain some extra momentum. In underwater sections, it's usually faster to do an up trick, and it saves a couple of frames over doing a neutral trick, for instance, in the left clip, since the boost from an up trick happens at the end of the animation rather than mid-air. Whether or not the directional tricks in MK World are gonna be useful remains to be seen. An MT glider in 8DX refers to holding a regular mini turbo, SMT or even UMT over a glider panel and releasing it mid-air. This usually saves some time over tricking on the glider panel, which sets your velocity to a fixed value. I tried doing the same in MK World, but it seems that going over a glider panel will cancel your drift and negate your current mini turbo, and the glider panel will instead always yield a boost. Thus, empty gliders will not be part of the game. Another mechanic that's closely related to an empty glider is a motion glider, which involves the use of the gyroscope to turn extremely sharply mid-air. But since motion controls were not available in the demo, I cannot speak on this technique. The glider handling itself felt a bit stiff at times, even with the characters that should have a good handling stat. A completely novel mechanic this game introduces is something I just go ahead and call glider twirling, and you can perform it by doing a trick input mid-air with the ZR or R button, or by shaking the controller and holding the stick in a certain direction. This allows you to move around in the glider with more dexterity, especially in the sideways direction. Perhaps this feature could become MK World's equivalent of a motion glider, assuming the latter won't exist anymore, in a sense that you can change your trajectory mid-air much easier than if you just did normally. Another small technique that can come in handy sometimes, especially in the 200cc mode of the game if that should return, is brake drifting. When charging any stage of the mini turbo, you can briefly tap the B button while still holding A in order to slow down a bit without losing your mini turbo charge. Oftentimes, if you're committed to a drift and notice you might run into someone's trail, you can brake drift to space from the item, which is much better than getting hit and losing coins and even more time, but you still get to keep your drift charge. In MKD, you could also start a drift before going over a ramp, and you could build up your mini turbo mid-air. While you can still drift over ramps in MK World, it felt to me that you could no longer charge your mini turbo stages mid-air, and if you drop into water, the drift is nullified altogether. You can probably expect blue dodges to work in a similar fashion to AD, where you can either use a horn or a mushroom with precise timing to dodge it, but one of the Nintendo employees also mentioned to me that you could use the feather, which you can also pull in first to dodge a blue, but unfortunately I was never in the situation to verify this myself. Another prominent mechanic in MKTX were invincibility frames, or iframes for short. After you get hit by an item, you're invulnerable for a certain amount of frames. You can, for instance, make use of this by hitting a banana or a stage hazard like a fire wheel to cancel the spin out of a blue or even red shell, as hit animation for shells is longer than that of a banana. This mechanic is again returning in MK World. As a reminder, in MKAD, the amount of iframes depends on which combo and character you use, so this might also be the case for MK World. While we are somewhat on the topic of items, I want to talk about bill extensions. Normally, a bullet bill has a set duration, or it will end after you've passed a certain amount of players. By using the bill at specific spots on some tracks, the game will extend the bill duration by a couple of seconds, making bullets extremely broken on these tracks. It looks like this time around build extensions will be a thing again in MK World. If you just compare these two clips, it's pretty apparent the build on the Shaiga Bazaar section goes on for way longer. A new mechanic in MK World are jumps. You can start charging a jump by neutral hopping and holding the drift button until you see the mini turbo sparks show up. This slows you down a little bit. You can then input a direction to jump in that direction, for instance to land on a rail, or you can also elect to jump in a straight line by not inputting any direction while releasing the drift button. I tried using it almost like a standstill mini turbo in MKV if I wanted to slow down and beg for items anyways. I'd wager there could be some interesting strats like small corner cuts or even being able to hop over small walls without having to use the feather item. In MKAD, there's a cool strat where you get a bounce off a train trolley for a really big boost, and it appears that in MK World something similar is possible. By charging a jump and landing on top of a car, you can receive quite an impressive speed boost. Not only that, but you can apparently bounce off a variety of stage hazards and even other players. To me, this mechanic looks like it has a ton of potential for really fast driving and cool shortcuts, so I'm personally quite excited to see it being optimized. While playing around in the free roam mode a little bit, I noticed that you sometimes receive a bigger boost if you execute two trick boosts right after one another. I'll just refer to it as chain tricks or chain boosts for the time being. These popped up in a variety of situations and can give you a lot of speed. I think this could also explain why bouncing off a car can give you such a big boost. You stack the neutral empty from the hop with the trick boost off the top of the car for a really big chain boost. Just very quickly, here's some random interactions I spotted. The boomerang is now a timed item. Just like the fire flower, when you use the boomerang once, you now have a timer before it expires, and you have up to 4 throws instead of 3 as it was in 8DX. It feels quite strong in the pack, especially with the final throw that goes for a long distance, and you can also pull it quite commonly now. If you use it once, it will no longer go into your offhand like in 8DX though, so you have to fully get rid of it before you can access your second item. The boomerang also gets destroyed instantly if it connects with another boomerang or a bomb. Compared to the boomerang, fire and ice flowers feel way more rare. They now also have less throws than in 8DX, they now have 7 instead of 14 previously. Dodging in the Mega Mushroom also no longer cancels the effect of the Mega like it did in MKV. If you use a horn, it now blocks the item slot for the duration of the horn animation, which means that if you want to chain it, you have to use it around a second before the item set. This next one is maybe not too surprising, but the coin shell can trail someone just as the red and green shells can, which means you can lose it if someone runs into it, and it can also be broken by items such as fire or ice flowers. That's about it for what I've learned about the game. I've put together the script and this video on the day before the direct already, but then I decided to hold off on it to see if we learned anything new. The two main points of the direct were that you can drive on walls and also the rewind feature, but maybe fortunately for me we didn't really get a ton of new info apart from that from the direct. This is my first scripted discussion type video I've ever done, and I've put in a lot of time and effort, so please let me know any feedback and corrections in the comments and any other things you're hoping for or excited about for the new Mario Kart game. Cheers and have a good one.